Folks to use your time when you're called on to ask questions. If we have time at the end, then we can take more time for other things, more maybe free-flowing discussion. We're also, just as a heads up, going to be doing some tabling in the quad, both quads, Lassen and library, and so there'll be more time for even more free-flowing discussion. The point of the forum is to get as much information out as we possibly can to you and to answer your questions. So we ask that you keep the questions to roughly 30 seconds or so. Um, and again, if we don't have as many people and you need more time, I think that's fantastic. We're going to keep a speakers list with priority to those who've not had a chance to ask a question yet. And as she said, Dean Bellin is our moderator today. So first of all, I just want to start by saying and just acknowledging for all of the deans, this is not something, this fee, that we would have ever seen ourselves doing. It's not how we see ourselves. It's not what we imagine, and we certainly don't like it. So we're not here to sell you a fee. We're really here to talk about what's going on at the CSU and at Sac State so that you know, and so that you know what we're going through and why we came up with this as an option, as a possibility. We really are trying to see this as we're all in this together, and how do we get through this time and make this work? Um, let's advance the slide, please, Shannon. Thanks. So this is a little bit about just how we got here. Um, I was faculty like the other deans on the panel, and when I taught here many years ago, um, it was a very different time. Students would line up like out my door and down the hall just to get into their senior capstone class. And listening to those stories of students who needed the job or needed to leave town and needed to get this done, and I'd already added way beyond my cap. It was just a very difficult time at Sac State. Um, it was before President Nelson came, and our graduation rates were 8%. They were very low. Um, Then the CSU, thankfully, made the Graduation Initiative 2025. President Nelson came. We all got on board with increasing our graduation rates. And to do that, the system, Long Beach, the chancellor's office, started giving us one-time funding every single year to add more sections to help students move through to graduation in a more timely way. And that is exactly what happened. Our graduation rates went from 8 to up to now 37%. We didn't have those long wait lines anymore. People were able to get what they needed. It was fantastic. And during that time, and you've all been a part of that, we brought on many lecturers to teach those extra sections. Um, they are temporary employees, but it's still tough because that was one-time funding. It wasn't baseline funding that you could really use for ongoing personnel costs that are fixed costs that don't change. So that GI 2025 is gone because it's 2025 and the funding is gone, which means we have several lecturers here and no more of the one-time funding we have used to pay their salaries. So we're currently $8.3 million in the red, in the hole, in academic affairs. The area on campus, the unit on campus that covers your course is academic affairs. And while in other times we might have been able to weather that and still kind of find some new strategy, because the state is also in such a budget crisis. The state of California is proposing a $375 million cut to the CSU, 37 million of which will be to Sac State. So we don't have any mattress. We don't have a safety net for this. So we just can't maintain the number of lectures that we have anymore to cover our our classes and our costs. And so we came up with an idea to propose. This is a vote, it's not a mandate, but it's an idea. Shannon, you want to flip to the next slide? The student success fee. This is something new for Sac State. Campus has other fees. students pay tuition and fees, and you know about those fees. They're for the union and the well and health and athletics and transportation, a lot of other things that aren't really directly related to your academics. We've never had a student success fee here at Sac State. This is new. Um, all of the fees that we do have are very highly regulated and subject to an audit process. And so they can only be used for exactly what they were intended to be used for, exactly what they were voted for. So the well is only for the well, athletics is only for athletics, student affairs is only for student affairs. This fee would be very specifically to address the funding challenges that the CSU is having now. It would be specifically for classes, for academic resources for students, maintaining equipment that we need to maintain for you, or maintaining professional development opportunities, all of the things that students need, even in addition to their classes. But first and foremost, this fee is a way to bring back the classes that we have had to cut this year, cut for the fall. Um, and we'll talk a little bit, Shannon's going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the fee in a minute, but I want to explain just two more quick things. Want to flip this slide, Shannon? Thank you. This is a picture of where in the CSU you'll see these fees. Otherwise, not all of the CSUs have them. As I said, we never have. We're going to fall in between sort of the red and the blue on this chart if this fee should pass. A lot of the other fees that you see on this slide, these campuses passed these fees many years ago, more in the time that when I was referring to, with students outdoor and down the hall. So these are fees that have been in place at other campuses for many, many years. We are the only ones who are talking about proposing a student success fee post-COVID. It's a harder time to do it. This is not the best time. We fully realize that. But we're all seeing campuses merging together, programs across the state closing, layoffs both at Sac State and other places. And so rather than just sort of watch that happen, we wanted to at least bring you this information and say, we can do what some other campuses did years ago and add this fee, and bring classes back and maybe stop some of the other bleed that we're having. Okay, one more slide before I pass it on. The fees that you discussed and had implemented in the summer, those fees were done by a process called alternative consultation. And they were not fees related to classes. This fee, as I said, would be directly related to academic work, and it's not alternative consultation, it's a referendum. So this fee is being decided on by a vote. So you're either going to vote yes, which means there's a fee of $360 a semester, $720 a year, or you would vote no, which means this fee does not come into play at all. So it's a up or down vote, and the voting will happen. We'll talk about that exactly when. The voting happens right before finals or during finals week, but all the information is going to be ahead of that, and we've got other information processes in place. And you're going to either vote yes or no, and it's as simple as that. Okay. All right. I'm going to pass it to Shannon, who will talk about the specifics of the fee.
All right, thank you, Mary. So I want to talk a little bit about what the student success fee would do should you vote yes on this. So as we said, a yes vote is a vote for a $360 per semester fee beginning in fall 2025. This fee can cover two different kinds of categories um, of funding programs. The first of these is academic programs and instruction, and this is primarily classes, right? This is what we would use to augment the class schedule for the next academic year and moving forward, as well as provide supplemental instruction and tutoring to students. So these services that are really important, particularly in classes that are really challenging. The other category into which this funding may fall is student success infrastructure. So this is a category that includes services like augmented academic advising and augmented career advising. One of the things that we hear from students very frequently is that there is a need to have more advising, more career advising, more internship placement opportunities, as well as opportunities for paid internships. So the idea is that ultimately we would love to use some of these student success fees to cover some of those services that are really important for students. The other portion of the other type of thing that could fall into this bucket, student success infrastructure, is funding to cover technology upgrades as well as equipment upgrades. Around campus, we have a lot of computers. Many programs are pretty technology intensive and have specific software needs. This fee could be used to upgrade technology and equipment within instructional spaces. And this would make sure that we have the resources that you as students need to be successful and ready to enter the workforce. So I want to go back to this because at one point we actually had percentages of this fee that were designated to each of these categories. But as we talked about it and as we met with the student uh, fee advisory committee, one of the things that became very clear is that our needs change over time. So while right now our greatest need is to augment the class schedule to make sure that you have the classes that you need to graduate, at some point we hope that the state will begin to restore funding to the CSU system, and then we could divert some of these funds into other services that are really going to augment your educational experience. So there are no percentages on these, but for the first few years, when the CSU system is facing this really significant budget deficit, the majority of the funding will go to increasing the class schedule. So making sure that we're augmenting the class schedule and students have the classes that they need to progress and to graduate in a timely manner. Couple of other things that I want to mention about the fee. First of all, there is a 3%, 3% of this fee is being designated as a return to aid for students with financial need. So this is primarily designated for students who are middle class students who are not receiving other sorts of aid that would cover this kind of fee to make sure that they have some means to get some financial support. This would be administered through the CARES office in a way that's similar to the financial aid for other student fees. Um, and students can apply for those funds and be awarded financial aid through that means. 3% of the fee will also be designated for disability services. So this is allocating money toward students with disabilities. Um, Disability services are often the first thing to go during a financial crisis, and we want to ensure that students with disabilities have the support that they need. Um, we'll talk a little bit more about that later because the way in which that portion of the fee is used will be determined by the Student Success Fee Advisory Committee, and Dean Shaw will talk about that in a couple of minutes. Um, the other um, caveat here with this fee is that in order to make sure that the fee remains at a level where we don't have to consider changing it anytime soon, there's an annual adjustment of on this fee. Every year, the fee will increase by 2% or the consumer price index, whichever is lower. So the rate of inflation. So if the rate of inflation is over 2%, you're still capped at a 2% increase per year. So there is a slight increase every year, but the idea is that we want to make sure that this is not something where students have to vote on increases um, every couple of years. Now, a no vote will result in a couple of things. There are a couple of implications here. You've all probably registered for classes at this point, and you can see that the class schedule is a little bit sparse this year. We've had to close or hide um, a lot of different course sections. I would say it's probably 500 or 600. Well, no, it's probably closer to 1,000 sections campus wide because we simply don't have the money to pay the lecturers that would have taught those courses otherwise. So right now, those classes are hidden in the schedule because we can't afford to offer them. It's highly unlikely that we will see any augmentations to the course schedule unless we have an additional source of money, either coming in through the student success fee or um, additional money coming from the state, should the state provide us more funding during the May revise. Our biggest concern, though, is that for the spring 2026 semester, if depending on where we are financially and whether we get any additional state funding, we may have to make even deeper cuts into the spring 2026 schedule because the fall schedule doesn't meet the needs to balance our budget right now. So we're offering more classes in the fall than than is sustainable given our baseline budget. The other thing we know is that we're facing an $18 million reduction to our baseline in academic affairs this year. And next year, we're facing another $6 million reduction. So, in addition to the reductions that we have in the schedule this year, we're anticipating even more for the following academic year. And this is something that's really hard because we know that this is going to hit the class schedule. We just don't have any other um, options for reducing expenses within academic affairs other than adjusting the number of courses that are offered. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the cost analysis here. Adding a fee, of course, is going to add cost. So with this $360 student success fee, this is going to increase tuition and fees for next year by $720. So the annual tuition and fees next year would be $9,734. If this were the case, we anticipate that students should be able to enroll in 15 units should they choose, which would keep you on track for an 8 semester or 4 year graduation or degree completion. The total cost is about $38,936. Excuse me, without the student success fee. Um, the annual cost for tuition and fees for 25-26 is $9,014. However, not all students are likely to be able to get 15 units. We are not offering enough classes in order for everyone to get what they need to graduate. We are not offering enough classes to meet our target for the CSU system. And that is not for any reason other than we don't have the funding to pay for those lecturers. So my guess is that students would average about 12 units per semester, which means that graduation would be pushed to 10 semesters or 5 years for degree completion. And if you think about the overall cost for that additional year um, of of classes, the total cost is $45,070. So with the student success fee, even though it is $720 a year, the overall savings just in tuition and fees is $6,134. This doesn't include housing costs for that additional year, and it doesn't include your the lost income from going into the job market. So, $6,000 just in upfront costs for the uh, when you're paying that fee versus no student success fee and having to pull back the class schedule pretty significantly. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Dean Shaw at this point to talk about oversight.
Thank you, Dean Datweiler. And again, thanks to all of you for coming. We're glad to give you this information and want you to be educated on what your options are and what this really means for you. And one of the most important parts of this new fee is how it's governed, the oversight of how the money is actually spent. And it was said earlier that this is the first fee of its kind at Sacramento State. I know you have lots of other fees already, including some that were just voted on last summer. Those fees are outside of academic affairs. You know, they're in the office of the president or they're student affairs, and those monies can't cross over to support classes being offered. This is the first time we've done a fee like this in academic affairs. And academic affairs is overseen by the provost, who is also the vice president of academic affairs. And that's important because the oversight of this fee will be within her office, which means that we are actually controlling this money within academic affairs. So even something like your tuition is spread across campus. Student success, I mean, the other fees that you voted on or in athletics or whatever, they're outside of academic affairs. This will be controlled within this division, which directly impacts the courses you have available. Now, how will that happen? We will have to establish a student success fee committee. And we talked to the Student Fee Advisory Committee, which has several students on it, and this is how this works. They're in support of this. And this committee has not yet been established because, again, we haven't done this type of fee before, but it will be made up of students from each of the 7 different colleges and some students representing ASI and some students that are not in ASI. So all students have a voice. We'll have undergrads and graduates on this committee, and they will actually review proposals that the deans provide. So they can say yes or no, this is how we want the money spent. And if the main thing they want the money spent on is more course sections, then that's what the money will be spent on. And this will be done annually. So unlike some of the other fees of the past that are set and locked in and they can't change, this one we have a chance to review each year. So as Dean Datweiler mentioned, maybe one year we're more concerned about advising for job placements and students can say this is what we want. And so you can be involved or other students, and they'll have to make sure that not only is this money approved for that, but then at the end of the term, the student success fee gets to audit it and make sure the money was actually spent that way, which is again different how the other fees are set up. So they'll review that, audit it, make sure the dean spent the money as they selected, and then they report back to you, the larger student body, to say, yes, this was successful, this is what it did, you saw the new sections added, or we got the new advisors that we wanted, or whatever you decided as a student body you want this fee spent on. So again, this is different than the other fees that have already passed. It's reviewed annually, and we can actually make changes to it. And students, you have more control, not only on the vote, which all students get to vote on. And if you remember the last one, you had to attend the session to vote. This one, all students get an opportunity to vote. And then we can modify that each year. So it's an important fee. It doesn't go to pay my salary. It goes to what you decide this is spent on. So that's, I believe that's the last slide. So we'd like to turn it back to, is it Dean McGuire now, or do we open it up?
We, Dean Bellin will help us with moderation, and I know we have a